Welcome, and thanks for joining us again. I'm Rich Brady, CEO at the American Society of Military Comptrollers, and your host on The Business of Defense, sponsored by ASMC on Federal News Network. My guest today is Che Bolden, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Charles F. Bolden Group. The Bolden Group is a consortium of accomplished leaders and problem solvers, focused primarily at the intersection of space and national security. Their strategic model is rooted in 4 business areas: public benefit, executive advisory, problem solving, and engagement to advance science and security globally and sustainably. The space industry is poised to generate over $1 trillion in revenues by 2040, and our everyday lives are increasingly impacted by the space domain, whether we know it or not. Leveraging the space domain responsibly across national security, the economy, and society is the purview of companies like the Bolden Group. Che, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Rich. Really glad to be here.
Absolutely. Great talking to you today. So it's interesting this week that we're taping the show. Space is in the news with NASA sending a rocket up to smash into an asteroid. So it's great that we won't be talking about that today. We'll be talking about the Bolden Group, but space is definitely in the news. We like here on the Business of Defense to talk, when we talk to companies, to start at the beginning, kind of the origin story. Can you kind of go back to 2017 to the beginning of the Bolden Group and talk about how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually goes a little bit further back than that, just because of the family history. As I kind of have talked to you about in the past and whatnot, I grew up in the shadow of shuttle, having been the son of an astronaut. So I've got to observe space for quite some time. I'm not, as far back as the Apollo era, but we go back deep into shuttle and all of its successes. What ended up happening, my father was the NASA administrator for the Obama administration. And in 2017, when he left office, he basically went and hung a shingle in order to provide consultancy services related to the advancement of science and security. He was running that company for a while. I was still active duty in the military. My wife and my sister and I talked about it quite a bit and knew that my father needed a little bit more help because he was a one-man show doing it, and he's in high demand. And so I had offered up the possibility of me coming on board to be his chief operating officer. He said, "I'll do you one better. You got it." And he handed the company over to me to run. And so he was our first expert that we added to our stable of individuals. And then we just started to look for those who shared our values, shared our vision of the future, and had demonstrated they were strong leaders in complex organizations. And we started to ask them if they wanted to affiliate with us. And then that's how we got the stable of experts that we have. What we started to focus on was the basic concept of leadership. And at the time we were starting the company in this new iteration, COVID hit. And so we had to figure out business development, how do you progress the ideas that you have, how do you reach out and talk to people, and it was a bit of a challenge. And so we kind of tried to embrace that idea, and then we eventually got to the point where we wanted to create more of an ecosystem where people could join and contribute to the conversation, where we don't have to be the sole source of information or lead the conversation, but our expertise and our experience is there for people to rely on. And that's how we try to build our ecosystem now, through partnerships and collaborations, as opposed to the traditional old, hey, we're consultants, we're here to help, pay us this money, and then we're gone after we deliver a product. We don't want to operate that way. We don't operate that way. We try to create enduring partnerships.
So it sounds like you started out, space was kind of the core of how the Bolden Group started, but has grown over time. I know the experts that you have there, they come from a broad range of areas, from medicine, healthcare, education, cyber. You've got authors and Marines. Was this growth path that you've been on over roughly the past 5 years, was it intentional, or as you said, was it just as the market emerged in front of you, you went out and got the capabilities, the expertises that you needed?
Yeah. When you look at our website or any other of the the copy that's out there for the company, it's misleading in some respects. At our core, we're about leadership. That's it. And so the people we went to get right off the bat were those that we knew who were proven leaders in their field. Because of my father's background and my background, that kind of defaulted us to national security and aerospace.
Right.
But we knew there were some other components that needed the attention. Neither national security or aerospace can exist without science, technology, engineering, math, plus art and design, and so that was a natural byproduct. And then my sister is in the healthcare profession, and so in order for it to be a family business, we added the health part. Little did I know that health is actually foundational to all of those, and we can talk about that a little bit later if we can get to it. But when we brought the individuals in, it wasn't so much their expertise as in their proven track record. We wanted individuals who we know or knew and had observed were able to go into some of the most hostile, complex, jacked up places and help set them on the right path. You know, I'm incredibly proud to be the son of someone who went into an organization in the national government and took it from being middle tier as far as the place where people wanted to work to being the #1 federal organization in the administration. That's what happened with NASA. And I am not ashamed to say that I have no doubt that that's due to my father and the people around him and the type of leadership that they had displayed, and the people of NASA responded in that regard. And now NASA is once again one of the preeminent offices within the executive branch. That same thing can happen in a lot of places, both in government and outside of government. And we're just here to try and help people get to that solution.
So as you said, you've got customers on both the government side and the private sector side. When you go to them, what's your 30-second pitch? How do you sell the Bolden Group?
You know, I'm not the best at that. Being Marines, you would think, you know, we would have this self-promotion trait. The reality of it is we try to work with each individual, and we're not trying to sell anybody on anything. You know, the main hook, if you will, is helping individuals to identify a problem, and then if we're the right people to help them with that problem, we then have a conversation about it. One of the things that we continue to make sure is one of our first evaluation points, and as you alluded to some of our products, public service or public benefit is one of the things we put first and foremost. That is a non-tangible, and we look at it through the lens of what makes for a good leader. And I'm going to say something that some people that listen to this might think that, you know, we're getting into a cultural discussion, or I hesitate to use the term wokeness, but the reality of it is, if you're not taking into consideration the definitional concepts of diversity, equity, inclusivity, and sustainability in your leadership practices, then you're probably not going to be poised to be very successful. Because as we, whether it's subconscious or just by the natural order of things, we have generated a lot of value by putting those concepts at the forefront since we started the country. We may not realize it. You know, we may look and go, okay, that person's just too different for us, and we just shun them. But in reality, we have always embraced those concepts. Now, because it comes into discussions in a social construct, a lot of people kind of, you know, shy away from it. But the reality of it is, they're foundational to leadership and team building. You have to take those things in consideration. And so when we look to any potential partner, and that's what we prefer to look at any client or customer as a partner, is like, okay, where do you sit with your beliefs along the lines of those basic values? And then we can problem solve from there.
Yeah, this is great. I really want to get into, and I think we'll have time in the second segment to talk a little bit more about the corporate culture and your views on talent management. As it sits today, where the Bolden Group is today, what do you see from a business perspective as your competitive advantage compared to some of your competitors out
Absolutely. there? Absolutely. Yeah, you know, at its core, our knowledge of leadership. You know, we have the experience and expertise. Every member of the Bolden Group, whether they're a regular member or an affiliated member, has demonstrated that they know how to lead and build teams, and they know how to be members of teams. And so we take, you know, if we look at just the space sector alone, we've got 350 plus years of experience in the space sector. That by virtue of a number is irrelevant, but that by virtue of proven performance now becomes something significant. And so I strongly believe that just our fundamental ability to deliver our leadership skills and impart knowledge on leadership is that competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's a pretty deep bench. As we said in the beginning, depending on what estimate you look at, the space industry is poised to generate somewhere probably between $1 to $2 trillion in revenue over the next 20 years. You know, from a business perspective, and you're right in the middle of it, is it kind of the Wild West out there right now? A lot of companies, a lot of small companies, large companies, everything trying to sort itself out. What's it like competing in that kind of an environment?
That's a bit of a loaded question, only because so we'd have to go way back in time and figure out when the last time people really focused on space. 1962, John F. Kennedy, Rice University. We go to the moon not because it's easy, we go because it's hard. That was the last compelling narrative around space that had people interested in it. And so when you look at what space looks like today, there's two paths that it can follow. The first one is Space Race 2.0, which maintains a certain amount of institutionalism and tradition, or some new endeavor that's not necessarily a space race. Where we sit, if we go back to our core values as a company, we're looking to create equitable opportunity in the emerging space economy. You had mentioned that it's anywhere from 1 to 2 trillion. If we look at all of the traditional and institutional efforts that we have going into space, it's about $1 trillion to $1.1 trillion. The additional value that people are looking at are completely unrealized areas of importance. Agriculture, education, health, entertainment. All of those things will play into this emerging space economy. If we walk down Wisconsin Avenue right now, you're going to see 50 different types of businesses, and it's fairly normal. Nobody thinks twice about whether that company belongs here or not. But when we talk about space, that's not necessarily the case right now. A lot of capital, whether it's private equity, venture capital, or even institutional investment, are still going into those areas that are somewhat traditional. And that by default bars a lot of entry. What we want to do is open the aperture. We want people to talk about what opportunities there are in space, because to be perfectly blunt, roughly 615 human beings have left the planet out of 7.9 billion. That's a lot of a deficit. So if we look at the traditional definition of who's a space person, an astronaut or an engineer, a pilot or someone in the sciences, that's very limiting. So competition within those spaces is pretty established. It's going to stay institutional, but there's so much more, and that's what we're trying to get people's attentions on. That's where investment should probably start heading in some of these areas that are going to flush out this economy and make it something that economists themselves are accustomed to, but we're just not there yet. And so we're working really, really hard. Nothing against the institutional players. They're still doing phenomenal work. The other NASA thing that was going on this week was Artemis, which got slid because of Ian.
Right.
Hopefully all things work out as well as they can for those Floridians. But there's a lot of things that are in the news that are starting to get people excited about space again. What we want to do is make sure that same message or that same excitement gets translated into a language that someone who's on the streets of Detroit or in Kinshasa or in Mumbai will understand and say, you know what, space is someplace where I can go and I can succeed. We're just not there yet.
Great. I look forward to digging into that a little bit more in our second segment. This is the Business of Defense. We'll be right back.